the recording, so here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Okay.
Perfect. Well, yeah, just as kind of a high level overview, we'll go over our legislative and city process overview. So just some key highlights to remember as we embark on the first year of a 2-year session. We're going to divide this into kind of 3 main sections. So priority legislation with recommended positions. We also have bills with existing positions, and then we'll go into priority legislation, notable bills that, we're still going to be taking action on, but just for the purposes of brevity and not keeping you here for hours. We'll just kind of highlight some of those. And then we'll get into some budget and federal updates, which Joseph will take over, and then get into some of the looking ahead through the rest of the session. And so just as kind of some reminders about the legislative process and how this all works, the city, you guys all have the authority to take positions that align with the city's legislative platform throughout the session. Your guys' legislative platform, which as it stands now, is very comprehensive. So a lot of the bills that we will discuss are covered by a lot of those policy statements. We understand that we may embark on a legislative platform re-engagement process at some point. So looking forward to doing that. But for the most part, we have so many policy statements that cover a number of bills that we'll talk about. As always, bills are subject to amendments. That includes comprehensive gut and amend changes. That can really happen at any point throughout the session. The only kind of deadlines that they need to adhere to are 72 hours in print. So just like last year, what we saw with the last few nights of session, some of the proposals that we're going to be following and engaging on really heavily could change dramatically into something that is completely irrelevant to us, could be something that we completely hate, or something that we really love and would love to move forward with. So as always, we love to stay nimble. We try to keep you all as updated as possible as those things change and how crazy the state legislative process can be. This is the first year of a 2-year session, so there may be bills that we will engage on that don't quite meet the mark politically, or they need to have some more work done, some more time kind of out in the political ethos before they're acted on. So there are some bills this year that may be set for action in 2026 and become 2-year bills. And then as always, oh, go ahead.
No, Carly, and I was just going to provide you some background in terms of our legislative platform. So it's pretty comprehensive. It's 32 pages. The last update was in 2022. We normally update that platform every 2 years. We are postponing updating the platform until after the city strategic plan is completed or initially framed. So we want that alignment to be direct, and we also think we can really make our legislative platform a bit more concise based on those priorities emerged by council in that strategic plan. Sorry, Carly, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, as advocates that have been doing this for so long with so many other local governments, we're here to help guide you through that condensing process whenever that happens, because we've seen tons and tons of legislative platforms, and your guys is great and very comprehensive. But yeah, so in addition to that, I just want to highlight that measures presented in this Ledge Committee process are not necessarily comprehensive of all of our actions. It's just kind of a highlight of the ones that we've flagged. So moving on to the next slide. Some of the key issues that we've seen emerge this year include the following. So we have housing financing and permit streamlining. On the housing financing side, we've seen the emergence of 2 vehicles that contain 2 $10 billion housing bonds. One of them is going to pass, and we imagine that they're going to be condensed into one. But it really seems like just as last year when the legislature was prioritizing the climate bond and the school facilities bonds, this year they're really turning to housing production and housing financing. So that's something that we've been following closely. We do have a position outlined that would advocate for some dollars within that housing bond that could benefit the city. And then in addition to that, we have permit streamlining. So after the fires in LA, obviously we've seen the massive loss of structures, catastrophic damage. So the legislature has rolled out a 20+ bill package related to facilitating the streamlining of housing production. A lot of that really has to do with CEQA and other things that we know have been the focus of the legislature for a very long time. In addition to that, we have cap and trade reauthorization. So this is the process by which the state buys and sells carbon emission credits, which generate billions of dollars annually to be used for anything for GHG reduction purposes. So high-speed rail, transit operations, transit-oriented development and housing projects, clean energy investments. So just this morning, actually, and in response to the Trump administration's executive orders about kind of federalizing climate goals and inhibiting us as a state's ability to have more aggressive climate goals. The governor announced that we will be doing cap and trade reauthorization this session. Initially, we thought that it could happen in 2026, but it's happening this year. So everybody's kind of on their toes right now, looking to see how this process unfolds. That's something that we definitely want to engage on in as a city and really outline our priorities to our members. I do want to highlight that Senator Limon, our senator, is really leading the charge on the Senate side in this process. So given that she is our senator and we are likely her favorite city, we definitely want to be front and center with her on that. In addition to that, we have encampment abatement and homeless resources. So this really has to do with kind of we're on the tails of the grants pass decision. How are cities effectuating the goals of that decision, but also some of the executive orders that we've seen from the governor's office in a humane but productive way. So we've seen a number of bills related to coordinating services across entities, making sure that funding is available for cities that have their own encampment or not their own encampments, their own shelters. So there's a lot of focus there this year. And then this is something that we've talked about a lot last year, but it's incredibly an acute issue this year, but a property insurance availability and affordability. Eric will touch on this a bit later, but there are hundreds of bills in this space. We've highlighted a couple, but this issue will continue to evolve, likely through the budget process as well. But we're hoping to kind of extract some dollars at the state process that the city would be able to apply for, given that you guys are so situated within that very high fire severity zone. And then we have Brown Act modernization. We'll talk about this in some bills a little bit, but we're looking at comprehensive reforms, given that a number of those flexibilities that were kind of born out of the COVID-19 pandemic are angling to sunset this year. So we need to look at something more comprehensive. And then, of course, energy affordability. There's been so many changes at the PUC level, at kind of even at multi-state level as we transition to maybe a regional market. But energy affordability has really been a key issue this year that we're going to focus on as well. So next slide, please. Okay, getting into housing and land use. These are two bills that we flagged, one of which is actually sponsored by the League of California Cities. But they really have to do with the RHNA process improvements and the cadence by which local governments communicate with HCD. So AB 650 by Assemblymember Pappen really has three parts. It increases HCD transparency and timelines by increasing the amount of time that HCD makes its determinations, the COG and MPOs make their determinations, and how the city kind of assesses all of that data and comes back to HCD with their housing element. So we're increasing those timelines by 6 months. In addition, it requires HCD uniformity in assessing your housing element compliance and the status. So there can't be this back and forth all the time. They have to have a very clear set of determinations that they have to present the city with in order for you all to understand a very direct roadmap of how to achieve compliance. And then in the event that HCD comes back with corrections to your element, it provides penalty protections during that correction process. So that means that while you guys are making those edits, you have a 90-day period by which builders remedy projects aren't going to be moving forward, fines and other penalties won't be moving forward. But we really do view this bill as a good public policy, good faith effort to bring all parties to the table, give everybody a little more time and a little bit more direction on how they can communicate. So we're recommending a support position there. Senate Bill 457 by Senator Becker is kind of similar, but we view this as very complementary to the efforts of AB 650. this has really two parts. So it prevents the misuse of the builder's remedy by saying that the time between you guys adopt your housing element and when HCD certifies it, you guys are protected from builder's remedy projects. So it really relies on until that determination is made from HCD. Because right now we're seeing a lot of those projects kind of move forward during that liminal period where you guys aren't sure whether or not what you've submitted is correct, and whether or not you guys are going to be hit with additional corrections. The second part of this bill is that it requires those builder's remedy applications, if they do move forward, to be complete. So no more half, complete applications that don't have FAR ratios or other things where we see these developers really just try to get their foot in the door and kind of sue their way into allowing some of these projects to move forward. So both are very complementary, and we would recommend a support position. Happy to take comments and feedback on these at any point too. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to go over the housing bond proposals.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask questions as we go, or do you prefer to ask questions at the end?
Easier as we go, right?
I
Okay,
think so too.
yeah, we can definitely,
Let's do that.
yeah, stop there and open it up to committee members for questions.
You want comments and questions?
We'll do questions, public comment, and then.
Well,
So there's these questions as we go.
I think questions now, because I don't know that we want to stop at each thing and do public comment, so let's just do questions as we go and then public comment and then come back for count.
Or if there's any motion on taking a different stance to support versus opposition versus.
But we wouldn't take that motion now.
Yeah.
Some questions, thank you. So on slide 4, for the housing financing, just for these overview ones, how many of these for the housing financing ones, how much of those funds do we think would be available to Santa Barbara specifically?
You mean,
It's a big bond, it's a lot of money. How much of
Yeah.
that would we be eligible?
Sorry, we haven't talked about the bond yet. We were just looking at this first
Oh,
slide.
so you don't want general?
Yeah.
So that's all housing.
We can go to the bond. We'll do that and then we'll stop. No, I think that's a great suggestion. So, Carly, can you speak to the housing bond and then we'll just do questions on housing and land use in general as a topic?
Yeah, Carly, I'm happy to take it if you don't
Oh,
mind.
sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Thanks, everyone. So contextually here, as Carly mentioned, so this is kind of a holdover from last year where there were 3 bonds introduced: housing, education, and climate change. As you know, the education and the climate change bonds moved forward, but the housing bond did not. Assemblymember Wicks at the time last year promised to bring it back this year with an emphasis on housing. You kind of see the bond conversation increase as state revenues decrease, right? So as our state goes into financial uncertainty is when you kind of see these bonds come out as a way to fund these projects because the general fund doesn't have the capacity to support it. So the bond right now is a $10 billion general obligation bond. They're similar but different in terms of AB 736 and SB 417. We can get into the differences, but it's really being led by Assemblymember Wicks on the Assembly side. So to answer the question directly of how much of that is to Santa Barbara, the answer is dependent on what developers are in town that are trying to access this funds. So what I mean by that is a lot of the money in the bond, almost 2/3 of the dollars within the bond are going toward specifically the multifamily housing program and supportive housing administered by the multifamily housing program. So this is a very big program administered by HCD that usually developers apply directly for in order to get money to subsidize their affordable housing projects. So I think the answer to that, unfortunately, is it depends on what developers are going after that money for projects specific to your city. In addition to the multifamily housing program dollars, there is about $1 billion with a B for down payment assistance programs for Cal Home through Cal HFA, $250 million for farm worker housing programs, $400 million for infill infrastructure programs, and then about $1 billion for portfolio reinvestment programs. So none of the monies in housing bonds typically go directly to local governments. It's all kind of replenishing existing pots that are running out at HCD level. So I think that's a good segue into this next conversation when it comes to local housing trust fund dollars. So in 2018, when Senator Bell's SB3 was on the statewide ballot, the last housing bond we had that passed, there was a pot of money in there, $300 million for the local housing trust fund. It was a brand new program created at the time through HCD. This is the only state funding source for local housing trusts. So the concept was to give money to local housing trusts with a 1-to-1 match for local dollars to really expand the efforts of that program. And then those housing trusts would then distribute that money in their communities however they see fit for affordable housing projects and permanent supportive housing projects. So I know that the city has recently or somewhat recently created a housing trust. And part of the allure of that and the intention is to be able to access some of these funds from the state through the trust. Now, the problem is that we just had our last NOFA for the local housing trust fund program. It is now officially out of money from the last housing bond. So we are working with a coalition of folks that are trying to get additional dollars from the local housing trust for the local housing trust fund program into the existing housing bonds that are in print right now to replenish those pots of money to give the city a better opportunity of accessing those funds maybe more directly compared to the other funds that are in the housing bond. So that is the recommended position of support if amended is to support the housing bonds if they are amended to include additional monies for the local housing trust fund.
Okay, we'll stop there then for questions on housing and land use related bills.
Well, I get to be a little confused because we haven't covered all of the housing bills yet.
There
So
is,
I didn't mean to, I just meant to.
these two slides are recommended actions, and then there are a few slides later that are keeping the committee informed of legislation that we are seeing being introduced that way. So we can take a position at any time, but it hasn't been elevated for this meeting in terms of making sure that we're aligned in terms of position.
So I think, so maybe just to help clarify process a little bit, I think is, we have that there's this sort of lovely package of all of the sort of relevant legislation. I think the presentation has elevated specific pieces that our lobbyists have highlighted that are consistent with our legislative package, either oppose or support, that we want the committee to take a specific position on so that we can go ahead and start that conversation with our legislators. There's also some others where we're just monitoring. And then I think what we're asking is, are there other pieces of legislation from this list or from others you've heard of that you would like us to either take a specific position on at this point or monitor and watch? If that's helpful.
Any questions on what we've covered so far? All right, we will move on to homelessness services, encampment abatement.
Great, thank you. So here are two bills that we have elevated, and I want to also highlight that there are a number of other bills in this space that are evolving on a day-to-day basis. It seems like kind of following some of the actions that are taking place at the federal level, the state level, and also at the county and city level. We've seen a number of bills related to city and county dynamics that are evolving that we aren't recommending for action quite this early, but we definitely want to highlight that we're going to be very active in this space. So on encampment collaboration, Senate Bill 569 by Senator Blake Spear, this is a great bill that we view as really increasing the collaboration between the Department of Transportation or Caltrans and cities. There are a number of jurisdictional boundaries by which your guys' jurisdiction ends and Caltrans's authority begins. And most of those are, under highways and whenever they have their right of ways. But when you guys are enforcing certain ordinances related to encampment abatement, your authority kind of ends there. And sometimes these folks are moving from place to place. So this requires Caltrans to work with local governments to address encampments on their property located within the city's jurisdiction. And it would establish a liaison within their office for coordination with the city specifically. It would require the creation of a joint action plan in each district with local governments, where really the onus of this creation is on Caltrans. So this wouldn't be a major lift for you all, but it would require some additional coordination. And the hope is to have the state, through the budget process, provide an allocation for these funds to support these efforts. And really just increase the coordination and collaboration between those two entities. On safe parking and vehicle abatement, Senate Bill 748 by Senator Richardson specifically allows the encampment resolution grant funds to be used for the acquisition of property for safe parking sites, encampment or vehicle and RV abatement, and increasing safe parking site hours. Currently, the Encampment Resolution Fund, which is a favorite of the governor's and has been a mainstay in our state budget process for some years now since its creation, it provides direct dollars to local jurisdictions for encampment abatement, and really transitioning those folks into permanent supportive housing and connection to important services. But the program itself really doesn't say anything related to vehicle abatement and safe parking sites. And some of these programs that we know are very beneficial to these folks that choose to be in their cars. So this transitions those folks and allows those funds to be used for these programs that we know work and connects them to services. So we are recommending a support position on both of these bills. Any
And just to
questions?
add to Carly's statement, so our SURF Round 3 was specifically to address vehicular encampments. We're one of the only counties in the state of California that received that. So this would allow more counties to be able to apply for those supportive dollars. I will say we've been able to get a lot of traction in a very short period of time. We've been able to have more people through that funding program and as through the person. So $7.9 million in 2 years goes a long way. Any questions here?
Great. Well, then I will turn it over to, well, we're getting into community services here. This is a great bill that we've seen crop up as issues within local governments throughout the state in this past year. So on local artist protections, Senate Bill 456 by Senator Ashby specifically exempts an artist who paints a mural from provisions of contractor's license law. So what happened was there have been a number of cities that have art programs, including you all, where you guys pay public funds to hire muralists to, do art throughout the city. There were a number of actions taken during the summer of 2024 where local governments that were utilizing public funds for, muralists were getting hit with threatening legal letters that said that these muralists were not licensed contractors. And in order to be a licensed paid contractor, you have to go through an apprenticeship program, study, 4 years under someone, have some kind of accreditation from a school or through an apprenticeship program. But it really kind of ran counter to the artistic expression that is public art. So this just makes that exception and ensures that you all can continue to use city funds to pay local artists and make sure that they don't have to go through those, kind of grueling processes that really should be ascribed to painters, but maybe not artists. So it expands the pool by which you guys can hire and utilize public artists. So we are recommending a support position on this, and we view this as good public policy that makes sense. Any questions on this bill? Great, then I'm going to turn it over to Eric to talk about fire prevention and coordination.
Yeah, thank you, Carly. So Carly kind of mentioned it a little bit on the initial, but when it comes to wildfire, as in wake of the devastating LA fires, you can imagine it's been a very popular subject this year in Sacramento. Our latest count was over 175 bills were introduced just this session to deal with wildfire in one way, shape, or form. So obviously we can't go over 175 bills with you, but frankly, a lot of these bills I think are going to get amended or maybe even gotten amended to something else as we continue onto the policy committee deadline and the appropriations committee deadline in the next month or so. Meaning that I think a lot of these are going to change. We wanted to pull out a couple to let the committee know are happening for a couple different reasons. They're kind of covering some different areas of the law when it comes to wildfire resilience. But these are also both the chairs of their respective insurance committees. So Assemblymember Calderon is chair of Assembly Insurance, Senator Rubio is chair of Senate Insurance. That gives these bills another, another oomph when it comes to getting through the process because of the influential chairs that they have. So starting with AB 888 by Assemblymember Calderon, this creates a brand new grant program in state law that will be then used to fund for home hardening and community mitigation projects, fuel modification projects, et cetera, being funded through a portion of the increased insurance premium tax revenue. So it is a big statement bill when it comes to taking money away hypothetically from insurance providers and bringing it back into the community for wildfire resilience measures on the individual home side, but also on the local government side to be able to apply for those funds as well. We saw a lot of bills this year to deal with generation of new monies for this kind of activity. This is a very aggressive one when it comes to taking it away directly from insurance providers from that insurance premium revenues, but one that we think is going to have some legs moving through the process because of who the chair is and where the committees are going through this. When it comes to SB 616, this is more of a bill that I would expect coming out of this kind of disaster, which is related to statewide coordination, information sharing, making sure all state agencies and local governments are on the same page when it comes to wildfire risks. This really goes into the nitty-gritty of the Insurance Commission and makes additional subcommittees, if you will, through that when it comes to specifically home hardening standards. So through the Insurance Commission, I believe, Carly, the name of the new is the Community Hardening Commission into the Insurance Commission, which is an independent unit within the department for 7 members to advise the insurance commissioner on where to put this money for community wildfire mitigation and to really set standards across the board for local governments, for private organizations, for other state departments, the same standards for community wildfire resilience across the board to then eventually have additional funds go into that. So really an all-encompassing planning approach to make sure that we are all on the same page and are using the same playbook when it comes to supporting resilience for wildfires.
Any questions?
Great. And then I'm just going to highlight some bills that we already have positions on. The first relating to building code moratorium, and this was really related to rebuilding post LA fires, but they really are trying to implement this on a statewide level. So AB 306, which is authored by Assemblymember Schultz, but is co-authored by Assembly Speaker Rivas. So it definitely has some additional weight that is being carried as it moves through the legislative process. And it already is actually in the second house. We've had a number of conversations with members and with stakeholders on amendments to this bill, on opposition, and it's really sailing through the second house. So we're hoping to get more momentum there. But this would institute a temporary building standard moratorium for 6-year period on new residential building standards. So in terms of impacts to the city, this really limits, local climate, energy goals, especially pertaining to REACH codes. When we're talking about, pausing on the installation of heat pumps and other, climate GHG reduction tech, this is really major, and it could impact, the long-term savings for residents who now don't have access to some of these more energy efficient appliances. So we have an oppose unless amended position on this to allow cities to adopt these updated 2025 codes. And only apply this measure to new development because we do feel that this is really to spur the creation of new residential buildings. So applying it to existing development is just not really within the kind of scope of what the authors are seeking to do with this bill. On transient occupancy taxes, Senate Bill 346 by Senator Durazo. This is a bill that we have a support position on. This provides cities with the assessor parcel number on each short-term rental within the city's jurisdiction and allows you all full audit authority over the remittance of those TOT dollars. So this really ensures that the correct amount of TOT is being collected and remitted and allows for enforcement against unlicensed short-term rental units. This is especially important as we look toward some of those major events that are going to be occurring in 2028. We have the FIFA World Cup in 2026 in NorCal, and then we're going to have the Olympics here in 2028. So really wanted to get all of our ducks in a row to make sure that all of those units are being licensed and you guys get all the money that you deserve. So we do have a support position on this, and we'll be probably working through the second House Policy Committee and maybe having a representative come and speak on behalf of that bill from the city potentially.
Sarah, I was thinking to add on these pieces, and I apologize for not something earlier on having any use. Anything to add on these bills?
From me?
Yeah.
No, okay, no.
Okay.
I think we have some questions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was going to turn to you.
Thank you. Question on the AB 306. One question I have is who declares the emergency or the disaster or whatever it is that then would kick into this building code moratorium? Like, is it specific in there? Like, what counts as a disaster?
It just is pausing all building code, bespoke building codes from now until 2033.
Oh, not even with the, not.
There's
even
that,
with
it
the-
is, the disaster has happened.
Okay, okay, then I would say just oppose.
We're okay with the amendments. The 2026 or 2025 building code that goes into effect 2026 is actually pretty much where we would take a reach code. So we were okay with it if it goes into effect. The way the bill's written right now, it would not go into effect. The moratorium would happen in June. And it would preclude all the work that's gone into the next building code. So we're actually okay with it if they allow the 2025 code to go into effect. The CBOs are anti because it actually does not specifically talk about energy reach codes. It talks about any sort of city specific local amendment to a code.
Well, it's until 2030,
Yeah.
so we might want to do some things.
Yeah.
And it would
Yeah.
make it so
You can't do
we
it.
can't do anything. So I would say just.
Yeah, we can change. There's a bunch of different stakeholders around the state that are sort of balancing between the two.
And I just have when we say we've already taken a position on these, do you mean the city of Santa Barbara or, Townsend?
No, the city of Santa Barbara.
Okay, so we have.
Yes,
us.
absolutely.
Cool, thank you.
And the TOT legislation we've been actively involved in and have offered to testify. Yeah, that's fine.
Could be
But I'm gonna
you.
stop. Yeah. Yes. I'm gonna stop there because these are the bills with recommended positions as of right now versus what we'll go into, which is notable bills that we're monitoring. So if there's any action in terms of changing a position, wearing the position, I think the best time would be really now, yeah.
I think just on this, the memorandum, so AB 306 and SB 346 is not in the table. So I just wanted to
Yeah, we had these included in the slide presentation package. We've already taken positions versus the ones that we're recommending moving forward. So yeah, so we can update the memo to include those as well.
Okay, and then I suppose the question, if in the cases where we already took a position, are those letters all in a file?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah, we can link those to a shared drive on Moss and you can have access.
that would be fantastic.
I would also, I don't know, Barb, if we do this, I've seen other jurisdictions actually just have on our website, you know, all of our legislative letters each year, and then I'm just, yeah, I think that just for transparency, so that members of the community can figure out where they are as well, so that would be happy to do that, it's super easy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then you can quickly either go to the shared drive file or people to the website.
I just have one quick follow-up on 888, the home hardening commission. In theory, it sounds awesome. I just feel like Santa Barbara is so far ahead of where the rest of the state is. I wonder if you see any potential impacts in our ability to, I don't know, get grants or money or any challenges with this law, given that we are already way out in front. Is there, I mean, I don't know that it would change my position. The whole state needs to harden. But I hear that and wonder what is going to be the impact for us, because, you know, this has been a conversation we've had for, you know, a very long time. Do you have any-
Yeah, I think my comments on that would be that, you know, this is a new program that's being stood up by the Department of Insurance when it comes to looking for the program name here. Forget what I said on that. Can't go back to that slide right now, but I think I think the answer to your question is it depends on how the guidelines are determined by the Department of Insurance. And it depends on what they're looking for. I know for a fact that they've already mentioned that they're looking for very high fire hazard severity zones, obviously, and the intersection between that and low income individuals as their priority. That does not mean that it will only go to those people, but I think that is their goal, is to make sure that it is definitely being targeted at those people in the zones that are the most likely to burn and that cannot afford to home harden themselves. So that's the initial, but I think there's probably ways that individuals in Santa Barbara or the city itself could benefit from the program, again, depending on how the guidelines are written by the Department of Insurance.
Awesome. That's super helpful. And as I said, I certainly support the effort and would not recommend doing anything other than voicing our support. But I am interested in how the guidelines evolve vis-a-vis our city and where we already have gone in connection with hardening. And so just something maybe to flag that I'm interested in keeping an eye on.
Absolutely.
That's it for me. Thank you. Good question. Yeah. So, and these recommended actions, we have in this matrix here, it's all support. And I suppose we can save for the discussion part, things we might want to vote.
Yes.
Yeah. If that's right.
All right, we'll move on to bills that we want to bring to your attention. We're monitoring and may take a position. So this is just a sampling of, I think it's upwards of 25, I thought it was 30, yeah, bills. But Carly, I'll turn it over to you and the team, and then I'll turn it back to our team in here after.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of kick this off, and then Alelia, any gaps that you would like to fill, please chime in at any point. But energy affordability has been a major topic this year. Assembly member Irwin has been very active in this space with a number of bills. Senator Becker, who's chair of the Utility and Energy Committee in the Senate, has also been incredibly active. But a lot of these bills that we're seeing really have to do with, bill protections for residential customers serviced by IOUs, requiring that there be additional transparency with PUC agendas and the way in which that they can assess rate setting tools. And then, of course, we have the Pathways Initiative, which has been, dominating kind of a lot of our energy and labor spheres for some time now. And this really would allow for the creation of an expanded Western electricity market, overseen by a regional organization instead of CAISO, which currently kind of keeps us in our California box right now. So this is something that could mean major changes for electricity procurement, pricing, and just overall access if we do expand onto a Western electricity market. I will say that there is some turbulence that we're experiencing on the federal level, which Joseph and I can kind of dig into at a subsequently in our conversation here. But there have been some executive orders or things that appear to be precursors to executive orders from the Trump administration that could hinder our ability to have more autonomy over our energy procurement and pricing structures that we have here in California. So with that, I mean, Aulilia, do you have anything that you'd like to add here, or any bills that you'd also like to highlight?
And I think there's a big statewide effort from local governments and CCAs to look at the transmission side of the bill and ensuring that there's accountability for the utilities in terms of their cost effectiveness. They all have wildfire hardening requirements, and some are choosing to do more expensive hardening. And then all of those infrastructure investments are what they get a profit on. So creating more accountability on what they're selecting, is it the most cost effective and best case scenario for the ratepayers, as well as a cap on capital. So right now they get a guaranteed return on capital investments of 10.5%. They're actually asking for an increase this year despite record profits. And so there's a lot of looking at what goes into energy rates and making sure that they are in the best interest of the California ratepayer. So we're heavily engaged.
I'm just wondering if it might be worthwhile, there's so many here that are important that we might want to, at the sustainability committee level, do recommendations to.
Absolutely.
The brain can really look at it, because this looks like this needs a deeper detail.
And it's really nuanced. I mean, each piece is very nuanced, but we have some hand presentations we could bring to the committee that would be really insightful.
Great.
All right, we'll move on.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. I want to know that this is an overwhelming chart with so many bills on it. This is just to give you a snapshot of really what's happening at the permit streamlining level for housing production. So at the beginning, when we were talking about key issues for 2025, one of those was housing financing and permit streamlining. This is part of that kickstarting housing production package that has really been championed by Assemblymember Wicks through the work that she has done on her select committee on permitting reform. So these are a number of bills that deal with CEQA streamlining, entitlement, post-entitlement phase permitting, enforcement. I would say that there are some good things in here and there are some really tricky things in here. I will, point out that AB 712 by Assemblymember Wicks, that's a bill that would increase penalties for violating state housing laws to the tune of making cities liable for attorney costs. Those are bills that we are actively engaging on and will likely want to take positions on. But we are in the process of working with member offices to really understand what's moving in this package, what isn't, and getting a sense of where member priorities are. So more to come on this, but definitely wanted to flag this as a major issue that will continue to dominate this sphere probably throughout the next year of this 2-year session as well.
And
I
I'll
just want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to specifically call out AB 357 for, I personally I have not taken a personal position on this yet, but I want to flag the implications for the city of Santa Barbara specifically are huge if we move away from the LRDP framework. And so I think it's really, really important that that becomes one that we're actively tracking and engaging on. And I mean, I don't know enough to know that I oppose it, though I think you can probably tell that's the direction I'm going. But I'm very concerned about what that would mean for Santa Barbara specifically.
I would just highlight, I think AB 1026 is one that I think is, this is an investor-owned utility, so like SCE. One of the challenges with how like local governments and permitting has been extended timelines from some of our utility companies for connections. And so that would be a great sort of requirement to have those utility companies also meet the same permit review and timeline. Yeah, and it's not just permit timelines, it's also connection timeline, like just the actual connection of the utilities. So that might be something to add to that piece of legislation.
Are we doing questions or comments on all of these or just so far this one?
I think this is all that's coming up on these.
So, yeah, I was sort of surprised not to see AB 357 anywhere on these lists, and I think that I will save it for comments too, but I mean, it's so incredibly important. And I mean, I want to make sure I'm understanding, like it allows for bypassing coastal commission.
So right now, universities have to do a comprehensive planning approach similar to our LCP that gets approved by the commission, but it's an LRDP and that goes through the commission and all of their development has to comply with that. And if it doesn't, they have to go to the commission to get approval and it can be appealed. So yeah, it would just essentially get rid of that altogether.
Yeah, so I mean, I would put that as strongly opposed. I mean, I can in here strongly opposing, and I am.
Yeah, it's on the list under entitlement. It's the first bill listed and it's also in our bill matrix. So if you want to recommend a position at this point, you could.
AB 357.
Yeah, it's the first Alvarez, the first under entitlement. Yeah.
And I think the purpose is student housing is a problem and it is a problem. And I get that. And we definitely do slow it down, but just, it would be scary to me to not have that comprehensive planning tool, given how close UCSB is to our city.
Absolutely.
Well, I definitely have one of them down this list with my yeses or nos, but maybe we do public comment. Yep.
So do you want to move on? Then we'll just cover the additional notable bills and then we'll go to public comment and come back. Does that sound good?
Great.
Okay. All right, Carly.
Yep. I'll talk about this one, SB 707.
Okay.
So when it comes to Brown Act modernization, I'll kind of, you guys know this, just as well as we do in terms of, you're living it, but kind of let's go back to the COVID-19 era when it comes to Brown Act and transparency. We passed AB 249 and then subsequently passed AB 2449, which is the bill that we're currently living off of right now when it comes to our flexibility for conducting public meetings. That authorization or flexibility in law is going to expire January 1st of next year. So in order to continue some sort of flexibility when it comes to Brown Act modernization, something has to pass this year. Otherwise, we're going right back to pre-COVID-19 rules when it comes to participating remotely. And as a reminder, I think a lot of people are forgetting now, you had the ability to participate remotely prior to COVID-19, but the set of circumstances were very different, and the burdens were quite high for folks when it comes to posting on the agenda about where that individual is, allowing members of the public to come to that location to give public comment. A lot of times that meant, notices in front of the hotel, keeping your hotel room unlocked. It was pretty uncomfortable for a lot of people. All that to be said is that there's two different approaches going through right now. In the assembly, the approach seems to be a straight a removal of the sunset on AB 2449 that expires in January, and just kind of continue on this status quo that we're on right now that seems hypothetically to be working for some and working for all in the flexibility standpoint that you are able to choose how you want to address it. The Senate is taking a much different approach. So the Senate, Senator Durazo is the chair of Senate local government, where a lot of this conversation is being held. The Senate really wants to do a comprehensive modernization for the Brown Act that is all encompassing, get it all done at once. No more of this, uncertainty and flexibility of COVID-19. Let's bring it to the new age. And so what that means is yet to be determined because this bill will take additional amendments. But I just want to state that it's likely going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And so I'll go through a couple provisions of SB 707, but it's going to be a big it's going to be a big change from what is currently in law. So for starters, it requires two-way audio-visual communications for all council meetings and Board of Supervisors meetings going forward. So it's no longer an option; it is a requirement for this bill. Alongside that is the requirement, an expanded requirement that the public can request interpretation services prior to that city council meeting, as well as mandates agendas be translated into specific languages over a threshold of speakers in your county. Now, there was amendments that allowed that to be digital translation because before it was supposed to be, hand translation, which would be very difficult on the clerk's office, but they are allowing digital translation for that. Something to consider is that the bill says that the agendas need to be translated into all languages spoken by 20% of the county. So right now they are using the county as their metric for language speakers, which, as you know, could drastically change individual cities' requirements. So just because you're Santa Barbara, it's possible that in Santa Barbara County, there's a language that goes over that 20% metric, but not in the city of Santa Barbara. You would still be required to translate into that county or into that language. So you can imagine statewide how that gets extrapolated. Places like LA, Orange County, Bay Area, that could be problematic for a lot of cities that may have to translate into 3, 4, 5 different languages. Whereas their jurisdiction maybe only requires 1 or 2, but because of the county language, they have to go, the full distance there. So we do expect there to be a lot of increased compliance costs and staff workload when it comes to implementing this, should it get passed. I do think that 2 things I want to mention. Carly and I have spoken with Senate local gov staff quite a bit for this, who is kind of the brainchild of trying to make sure that this is comprehensive. 2 things came out of that conversation that I promised him I would remind all of our clients when we talk to them. He was very clear that the Brown Act is not supposed to be easy to comply with. The Brown Act is not for ease; it is for public transparency. So he wanted that to be very clear in that he is very much knowing that this is going to be a fight and is willing to fight it. That's number 1. Number 2, they have yet to determine how they are going to solve the Zoom bombing issue. And I know that you guys are very familiar with that. And that is that is the first thing that Cal Cities and other groups have said is, hey, you're mandating this 2-way communication for every single city council meeting. How are you solving this issue? And they are very honest and candid with us that they don't know how to solve it right now. And it may come or it may not. But right now they are putting that issue to the side in the spirit of transparency. So I'll stop there with any questions, but I do expect this to change a couple different times before it gets across the finish line, especially when it goes hence to the assembly. But right now, the biggest change is that it would require that 2-way for all council meetings. It is not, I should have mentioned this, it does not require that 2-way for committees or ad hocs or anything not final, just for the general and special city council meetings.
Thank you, Eric. And Sarah, I think you mentioned we meet most of these.
Yeah, we pretty much already complied, but I think we would definitely want to support the assembly bill that was spoken about first, which would just remove the sunset clause. I mean, that's just. Being a non-committee member. We're not separate.
Any questions?
Is this the time to ask about ones that aren't on these?
We can do that at the end if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch on a couple of more slides related to budget, and then we'll go to questions and public comment. Eric, are you for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so just quickly on the state budget, obviously things are evolving quickly. We're approaching key May revise season, which will really give us a better picture of what's happening. But there's some key drivers of uncertainty here. First and foremost being the California and DC dynamics that are unfolding every day. It seems like there have been spending freezes, there have been direct attacks on our state autonomy on things related to energy, to housing, to, you know, our sanctuary state and city statuses. So things are just continuing to move, and it seems like there will continue to be uncertainty for some time, but we are going to budget appropriately for that. Obviously, we have the impact of the LA wildfires. We did take some early action within the budget to unlock some immediate funding there, and also take action on overspending in key programs such as the Medi-Cal program, which we expanded to incorporate undocumented immigrants last year. And it seems like there was some unbudgeted accounting that kind of expanded the program in ways that we didn't foresee. So we had to bond for about $3.4 billion to pay that down. In addition to that, the stock market spiral, you know, when we're talking about our progressive tax structure here in the state, we're really dependent on wealthy individuals doing well. A lot of the funding that supplements our general fund and spending really comes from capital gains. So when we see people selling off or, you know, not participating in stock market happenings, it could mean turbulence in future years. And I also want to note too that from the CalPERS side of things, you know, we do have to meet our actuarial, you know, rates and adjustments there. So when things aren't panning out in terms of those returns that we need to see, that could also mean some additional turbulence within the state budget, which could, you know, contribute to additional pension obligations that we have to pay for. So that's all to say that things are evolving. We'll know more in about a month. And then we will know whether or not we're going to move forward with things like earmarks, whether or not we're going to have things like the HAP program, which supplements a lot of our housing and homeless funding throughout the state and for local governments, and whether or not we really need a housing bond. Could mean that the governor wants to supplement a number of housing programs in the state budget process rather than go to a bond. But the May revise will determine quite a few things. Turn it over to Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, Carly, and hey everyone, good to be with you. Want to touch on a couple key federal issues, as Carly has alluded to at points throughout this presentation, starting with the evolving federal dynamics. So I wanted to touch on this from the outset, and you know, I think it's fair to say that we're in somewhat unprecedented times at the federal level. You know, and with that has come a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty. Believe it or not, it's been about 85 days since President Trump took office for his second term, and there has been no shortage of activity. Right away, the administration came out and implemented a federal hiring freeze, and we've seen the downstream effects from that kind of continue to permeate, not only here in DC, but across the nation, as there's many federal employees all across the nation. This was simultaneously paired with executive orders focused on ending DEI practices across the federal government, as well as the administration formalizing the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE. But I think, you know, the biggest kind of bombshell that came out of the gate immediately in this new Congress was on January 27th, when the Office of Management and Budget announced a freeze on all federal funding. You may recall that there was a memo issued, it was rescinded, it was taken up by the courts. And we're still kind of in this period of uncertainty when it comes to federal funding and different agencies. Grant recipients are still, you know, uncertain if they're going to be receiving their monies, whether that's through Department of Transportation or any other agencies, despite temporary restraining orders from district judges. But big picture, this is still being litigated. It's not clear if the administration has fully complied with court orders. And since then, there's been, you know, dozens and dozens of additional executive orders, internal agency memos, new directives, all this in an attempt by the agencies to comply with these new executive orders. And then that leaves us, you know, wanting to make sure that our cities and local governments and states are also complying with these orders and react as necessary. So taken as a whole, to be frank, a lot of these actions have led to some more questions than answers a lot of the times. And as we kind of readjust our approach to this new federal government landscape, I just want to be clear that many of these developments will take months and maybe longer for them to fully play out. But we're already seeing some significant impacts at the agency levels. And we receive many questions from local governments on how best to react or not react to these developments. I know there's been certain executive orders that have scared a lot of folks when it comes to their funding streams and when they need to make big budget determinations, and some have acted a little too soon and shot themselves in the foot, and others have kind of waited for things to become more solidified. So I am urging folks to take a little bit more of a cautious approach, because the administration likes to come out swinging. They like to put forth their most aggressive proposal initially, and oftentimes through litigation or congressional pushback, a lot of those kind of get dwindled down to something less serious. So we'll continue to do our best to flag items and explain their potential impacts. And just want to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page working through these items. There's a level of confusion that's even permeated the agencies and their staff themselves, because they're looking for immediate answers and how to respond from their boss, which is the president. And a lot of agency staff have told me directly that their legal teams are still working through many of these items and figuring out how to implement that. So if there is anything you're coming up against when it comes to delayed funding, if you're working through grant agreements, if you're having trouble contacting certain agency officials or regional offices, if you get direct outreach from the federal government, that's happened a couple times, not just from an agency, but even people working with the Department of Government Efficiency. If any of those things happen, please let us know, put it on our radar, and we'll work with you to work through these issues. But to kind of take all that and wrap it into California and some of the issues we're focused on here, I wanted to touch on a few of these developments that have stemmed from executive orders, starting with the climate standards. Recently, there was an executive order titled Protecting American Energy from State Overreach. This was signed by the president last week. And it's really centered on the idea that American energy dominance is, according to the administration, threatened by state and local governments that seek to regulate energy beyond their authorities. That's in the words of the administration. And the EO, the executive order states explicitly that California punishes carbon use by adopting impossible caps on the amount of carbon businesses may use. And so they're going after this. What comes next? The Attorney General has been directed to identify certain state and local policies that may contradict the administration's goals through this executive order. So we could see a number of recommendations brought forth by the Attorney General when it comes to climate change or carbon penalties, greenhouse emissions. Different policies in this realm will be taken under consideration by the federal Attorney General and then provided to the president with recommended next steps. So we're not sure exactly where this is going to end up, but there will be some recommended next steps and potential enforcement.
Joseph, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but we have been informed of a time-sensitive issue. So we have a member of our committee that has to go to Finance Committee at noon.
Okay.
Yeah, or in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So we're gonna turn to public comment, and then we'll take it back to the committee for final.
Well, why don't we do public comment, and then we can always schedule a follow-up meeting to do that. Yeah, probably 10 minutes, yeah. So,
Okay, I do.
but let's at least do public comment.
Lisa Carlos.
Want to just stay here?
Yes, yeah.
Good morning, council members and staff. I'm really happy we've hired a lobbyist. We've needed one for a long time. I feel like cities in our position have needed one. So I'm grateful that you're here and we're having this conversation. Today, I want to focus on strengthening our message to Sacramento, especially on housing. When Townsend walks into a state legislator's office, I hope they're leading with facts, straight from HCD's own dashboard. From 2018 to 2023, California permitted over 752,000 housing units. But 75% of them were market rate or above moderate income. Just 25% were affordable to the people who actually needed them. Santa Barbara tells a similar story. During that period, we permitted 1,388 units, and only 13% were affordable. Meanwhile, our current RENA requires us to permit 62% housing at those affordable levels in our 6th cycle. That is nearly identical to the state's 60% target. So let's stop letting others define our narrative. Coastal cities like ours are in fact building plenty of housing. With Macy's and Sears alone, we have over 1,000 new units in the pipeline. But it's not the kind of housing that addresses our immediate affordability crisis. And we need to push back hard on the idea that market rate housing alone trickles down. In high demand cities like Santa Barbara, demand is inelastic. Wealthy newcomers and international students will always outbid our local workers. And 71% of our workers in the county of Santa Barbara, according to the county's new workforce housing study, fall into the low income category, and 2 in 1 are very low income. Market rate construction does not lower rents, and our own rent study that we do annually confirms this. Even with new development, median rents continue to climb. So here's what I hope our lobbyist is making crystal clear in Sacramento. We can't deregulate by over-legislating. We can't streamline by micromanaging. We can't solve a housing crisis by over-incentivizing what the market already builds in spades while underfunding what it won't. And if the state won't fund affordable housing, the very least it can do is stop getting in our way. Every bill should be judged by this question. Does it pull local resources and staff away from getting real affordable housing built? And here's another one. Does this bill weaken our ability to require or negotiate affordability from market rate developers? Because far too many do exactly that. One bill that captures everything wrong with Sacramento's current approach is SB 677 by Senator Wiener. This bill amends and expands by right approvals under 2 different bills, SB 9 and SB 35. While stripping local governments of their ability to require affordability or apply critical constraints in high fire risk zones. As you may recall, Santa Barbara added thoughtful SB 9 controls like affordability requirements and fire zone protections. SB 677 was
We need to wrap it up.
okay, sorry. While SB 9 could help create some middle income ownership lot splits in areas like the Riviera, Hope Ranch, and Montecito, none of these will be affordable. I really hope that we'll start to do a much deeper dive on all those Buffy Wick bills that you saw. They're really much the same as this one.
Thank you so much. Rob Fredericks?
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Rob Fredericks with the Housing Authority, City of Santa Barbara. I just want to say I appreciate your Townsend group here and everybody in looking at legislation here that's coming forward. I agree with all the comments that were made today on the bills to support, especially the bond bill with, as if it's amended to help support funding into the local housing trust fund. That's something that could really help. I'm just going to talk about a couple of other bills. I know this is more high level and I don't want to get too long into the weeds, but there are a couple of bills that are important to your housing authority and other housing authorities throughout the state. One is AB 282, which is all about anti-discrimination on housing source of income. And it takes what was passed a few years ago, SB 321, that forbid discrimination based on source of income, and actually goes a step further and allows for a preference for housing choice vouchers to be accepted as the renter over and above others without violating fair housing. So we look at that as a good thing for our low-income community with the vouchers. Another bill that's, I think, an easy lift to support would be AB 480. Quirk Silva, that's low-income housing tax credits. It allows the swap of state allocated credits for state certificated credits. I don't have time to get into what's the difference, but it really doesn't matter because they're there and it just allows that swap and provides for higher pricing of the credits that we can sell those credits for to private investors to bring in more money for specific developments. It's an easy lift. Let's see, I think there's one more. I have several, but there's so many, it's eye-watering, right? But here's another Wiener bill that SB 336 is the welfare exemption for moderate income housing. I'm not sure how this city would land on that, but it's something that would really help us in looking at tackling and doing new developments that's deed restricted for moderate income housing and having us have that property tax exemption for those long-term deed restricted units. So I'll leave it at that. Oh, on the federal side, I think here's another easy lift. Support the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act of 2025 that enhances the tax credit funding to states and also lowers the bond cap requirements. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred Sweeney.
I apologize ahead of time because I didn't understand the process here. But I'm gonna share some visuals. I'm a visual kind of guy. I'm not really gonna talk to these, except that this is coming at us under building remedy law right now, these images. And I don't know how you show those. And I've got to pass out my comments if I don't get time for them, right? And I'm gonna cover number 2 to start with on the state laws that are coming on housing, et cetera. We need to immediately get a change in the law for the 5 meeting rule that comes under all of these, including builder's remedy. They either need to increase that amount or they need to take out the appeals meetings counting towards those 5. That's circumventing all our ability to review these projects as citizens, et cetera. I don't think the 5 meeting rule applies to single family residents, but I need some clarification and I couldn't find an answer on that. State law in this state, this is a huge state with huge geographical and typographical differences. And these one solution fits all doesn't work. We need to recognize there are coastal shelves of Santa Barbara, there's inland valleys, there's the Great Central Valley. All those places act differently to how things are built and how buildings touch the ground. They touch the ground differently in all those locations. And the other thing that these laws need to recognize the importance of our historical settings, both natural and man-made. And that's why I'm showing this picture because it could be that our 21 missions are going to be in jeopardy. And then as a result of yesterday's ABR meeting, I think we should use the 418 Milpa Street case study to talk about why this system isn't working in terms of CEQA, in terms of traffic study, in terms of oversized buildings. And certainly there is no clear understanding that size, bulk, and scale, that term is not cohesive. Each one of those is a separate design parameter that we as architects use. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to community.
Do you guys want me to stay here or go?
We can.
I just go where I'm told.
We can continue yeah, I mean, if we want to continue to have another meeting in the near future, we can do that. But it's up to you guys.
No, let's do your preliminary. Yeah, let's definitely hear. I'll try. No, take your time. Okay, that way we can follow up too. So, first of all, thank you. That's first. Thank you. So, I'll just get going. Rapid. Okay, so just first going down this list, I agree with everything in the table. Just go in the memorandum. table bills for recommended action. I agree with these and thank you, but I would add to those, as mentioned in the slides, AB 306, was, I would just oppose it, not unless amended, but, oppose as much of my comments. And then SB 346, support, and those were in that table, so but they were presented in the slides. And then just going down, the list of, permit streamlining notable bills, I'm very concerned about several of these. I'll just rapid fire list them. I know we're not gonna be able to discuss them, but, so AB 609, SB 607, and AB 357, I would say are hard no's. Anything that, overrides CEQA, I think especially in our community where we have fault systems, we have steep slopes over 14%, we have high fire areas, we have very narrow roads that we know cannot support the kind of evacuations that we need. Anything that overrides coastal commission review, I think is just out of the question. Especially this one with university housing and, you know, with City College, you know, people have very, very fixed eyes on that. You know, Chumash homeland, great field, and it's not just like an open spot for building. And if we're going to override coastal commission or CEQA and historic resources, I'm strongly, strongly opposed to 609, 607, and 357. Going down this list, strong no on SB 677. This, you know, SB 9 lot splits and then having them now be in historic areas. I posted before, I think that we need more control on these things, especially because we're not just a big, flat, urban area. We have to be able to case by case look at these things. AB 818. I have some questions about that, rebuilding after disasters and waiving those fees. I mean, obviously, we want to be able to rebuild, but I'm not sure, you know, blanket, we were able to rebuild quickly after Montecito debris flows. And so I really have a question if this is gonna help us or hinder us. So it's question, comments on that one. Yeah, for 1026. And then AB 610. No. Strong no on that. And then there are some that just aren't on this list, and I'll just rapid fire off, and this will be recorded and I can share it too. But AB 726 and AB 670 both have to do with how we're counting units for RENA. And so the 726 count rehab deed restricted as new, and I have some, I don't know, I just have some concerns about its double counting. AB 670, I definitely don't think, oh, that one I could support. We're counting the converted to deed restricted as new. I would support that. I have questions about AB 11 and AB 590, if they would compete with our local affordable housing funding or duplicate HCD efforts, and if that would actually hurt us rather than help us locally. I would say no, hard no on AB 253 and AB 660, this post entitlement. I'm really not in favor of having private contractors that go around instead of our own agencies, and we can do better, we could be faster, but I don't want to be penalized by then not even getting a chance to look at that. I appreciate our own housing authority, Rob Fredericks, thank you for listing. I think AB 480, AB 282, I think AB 748 also, and SB 336 would really help our local housing authority. So yes, AB 945, I'd like the sustainability committee to really look at that and see what our positions are. Density bonus incentives, great, but if it's not our defined green building, or what is that green building definition, I think we need to look at that. No, hard no on AB 1061, allowing lot splitting in historic districts like Breaker Hawk. I mean, we fought hard on that, not to be able to just do that by right. SB 677, I just have a big no, but I can't remember why. I agree with the position of the lens as we approach Sacramento that Lisa Carlos described in her letter. I agree with the comments from Rob Fredericks of our own housing authority. And I agree with the statements of Fred Sweeney. We do need to be respecting land differences in different areas. We are not just a flat, broad Los Angeles basin. We are.
677 was the leader bill that amended SB 9 and.
Oh, yeah, hard no.
That's why you said hard now. You said that twice.
Yeah, and that's why, the emphasis, anything that overrides secret or the coastal commission, just no way.
Thank you.
And I will very briefly say, I think most of that I agree with. So I look forward to our follow-up meeting where we can see that all laid out. I'm pretty sure I agree with all of it, but I don't know what all of those numbers are, so it's hard to say 100%. I am interested, sort of from a strategy perspective, if, in addition to taking positions on all of these, which I think, yes, why wouldn't we? For sure. I would love to hear from Townsend where you think we have the most, and this is at a future meeting, but where we have the most capacity as Santa Barbara to actually influence the outcome or amendment of these bills. Because my biggest fear here is that we take a position on 45 bills and get 0 done. I'd like to take a position on all 45, but understand what are the 5 most important with the greatest potential for us to impact them. And if we could have some sense of that analysis, because I just don't know enough about the dynamics in Sacramento to say AB 375 is going to pass no matter what you say. And I don't want to expend all of our energy on that when we could stop lot splitting in historic districts if only we had spent energy on that. So I really would love some kind of pragmatic analysis of where we're going to make the biggest difference based on the things that Councilmember Snedden have identified as our collective biggest concerns. And I think she's spot on. So that maybe for a future date is what I would request. And thank you, everyone. Thank you to our public commenters and to our team in Sacramento and across the state. We're adjourned.
Thank you so much. Townsend team, following up with you, really appreciate the thorough review, and I apologize for having to cut short, but I'll share with the committee members all of the work that we're doing together by communication and copy you so they have it.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Bye.